A 5-year-old girl walked up to the most dangerous man in Korea and took his hand. "Mister, are you lost too?" His phone was vibrating. 3 men who didn't like to be kept waiting had his name in their mouths. A name on a list needed handling before morning. John Woo-suk looked down at 2 small fingers wrapped around his scarred hand and silenced the phone. Incheon Station at midnight had a heartbeat. Trains exhaling steam, shoes slapping wet tile. The winter air cutting off the platform like a blade, cold enough that every commuter tucked their chin down and moved faster, as if stillness itself was dangerous. Woo-suk was the only one not moving. He sat at the far end of the platform bench, back straight, hands resting on his knees, the edge of a tattoo climbing above his collar like a warning the shirt couldn't fully contain. His face gave nothing away. His eyes were the eyes of a man who had already said goodbye to something he couldn't name and made peace with never getting it back. He wasn't waiting for a train. He was just waiting. That's when the red coat cut through the gray. Dessa didn't drift through that station the way lost children drift wide-eyed, shrinking, looking for rescue. She moved like she had a destination, and the world owed her a clear path to it. Chin up. Backpack bouncing. Colorful clips scattered through her hair like someone who loved her had decorated her that morning with both hands. She was the only warm thing in that entire cold building, and she walked straight toward the coldest man in it without slowing down once. She stopped directly in front of him. She tilted her head, studied him with the raw honesty only children are still brave enough to use, eyes moving from his face to his hands to the tattoo at his collar and back to his face again. Then she reached out and touched his hand. "Mister," she said, calm as still water, "are you lost too?" The station kept breathing around them. Announcements, footsteps, a train crying in the distance. Woo-suk said nothing for a long moment. Not because he lacked an answer, he always had an answer, but because no one in 15 years had looked at him like that. Not with fear, not with need, not with an agenda hidden behind their eyes. Just a question, honest and clean and devastating. "Are you the one who's lost?" he finally asked. She nodded. No tears, no trembling, just fact. "My mama was right there. Then I saw the birds, and then she wasn't." His phone vibrated again. He didn't move. "We have to think," Dessa said, climbing onto the bench beside him like she'd been invited, settling her backpack on her lap, scanning the crowd with the same focused precision he used when he was hunting someone. "That's what my mama always says. Stop, breathe, think." The phone vibrated a 3rd time. Woo-suk reached into his pocket, looked at the screen. 3 missed calls, men whose patience had a body count behind it. He turned the phone face down on his knee. "Okay," he said quietly, carefully, like a man picking up something fragile he had dropped a long time ago. "Let's think." He stood. She slid off the bench instantly and wrapped 2 fingers around his, not his whole hand. Just 2 fingers. Like that was all the anchor she needed. And she led him forward, this tiny girl in a red coat, moving through a midnight crowd without a single drop of fear in her body, pulling the most dangerous man in Korea behind her like he was simply the next right thing to hold on to. The birds were pigeons. Dessa spotted them the moment they turned toward the east corridor, a restless cluster near the base of a flower kiosk, pecking at crumbs, completely unbothered by the river of feet moving around them. "There," she said, pointing. "That's where I saw them." Woo-suk scanned the corridor before she finished the word. Left, right, entry points, exit points, 3 cameras, 1 blind spot near the maintenance door, 2 men in gray suits at the coffee stand who had been sitting there long enough to mean something. He clocked all of it in 4 seconds. What he didn't see was Dessa's mother. "She was right here," Dessa said, stepping toward the pigeons like they owed her an explanation. She turned in a slow circle, studying faces the way someone had clearly taught her to. Then she stopped and looked up at him. "I only let go for 1 second. 1 second is enough," Woo-suk said quietly. He wasn't talking about pigeons. Dessa seemed to consider this seriously, then nodded like he had said something wise. She reached into her coat pocket and produced a folded piece of paper, a drawing, crayon on white, a woman with cloud hair and round glasses standing next to a small girl in a red coat. "This is my mama," she said, holding it up. "In case you don't know what she looks like." Woo-suk looked at the drawing, then at Dessa. Something moved behind his eyes that he didn't have a name for. He took the drawing carefully the way you take something that matters to someone and studied it. "Cloud hair," he said, "and glasses," Dessa confirmed. "She only wears them when she's writing." But she was writing today, so she probably still has them. "What is she writing?" Dessa's expression shifted into something between pride and complete certainty. "A story about a turtle who learns to fly. My mama says the turtle is scared at first because turtles aren't supposed to fly. But then he realizes the sky was always his, he just didn't know it yet. Woo-sok said nothing for a moment. Smart woman, he said finally. The smartest, Dessa agreed, like this was simply fact. They moved deeper into the east corridor, Dessa scanning faces with focused, unhurried eyes, Woo-sok watching everything she wasn't watching. The crowd thickened near the connecting terminal. Families, businessmen, a school group in matching yellow vests blocking half the walkway. Then his phone vibrated. Not a call this time. A message. He didn't need to read it to know what it said. He had been in this business long enough to know what silence from certain men eventually became. First calls, then messages. Then they stopped messaging altogether and simply appeared. He slid the phone back into his pocket without looking at the screen. Do you have a family? Dessa asked suddenly. The question landed without warning. The way her questions always did, clean and direct. No buffer, no apology. No, he said. She thought about this. That's okay. My mama says family isn't always who you're born with. Sometimes it's who shows up. Woo-sok kept his eyes on the corridor ahead. Your mama says a lot of things, he said. She's usually right, Dessa said simply. They were passing the coffee stand, now close enough that Woo-sok could see the two men in gray suits without appearing to look. Young. Alert. The kind of stillness that wasn't rest. One of them had a phone to his ear. The other was watching the corridor with eyes that were doing the same thing Woo-sok's eyes were always doing. Counting, calculating, hunting. Woo-sok shifted his position one smooth, unhurried step, putting himself between Dessa and their sightline. She didn't notice. She was busy studying a woman near the magazine stand who had the wrong kind of cloud hair. Not her, Dessa murmured, moving on. The man with the phone lowered it slowly. His eyes found Woo-sok across the corridor. 4 seconds of stillness passed between them, the kind of stillness that in a different setting, in a different night, would have ended with someone on the floor. Then Woo-sok looked down at Dessa. This way, he said quietly, steering her left toward the connecting passage without breaking stride. Natural, unhurried, like a father redirecting a child away from nothing in particular. Dessa followed without question, still scanning faces, still on her mission. Stop, breathe, think, she muttered to herself, her small face pulled into concentration. She has to be here. She wouldn't leave. My mama never leaves. She didn't leave, Woo-sok said. Dessa looked up at him. How do you know? He kept walking. Because you're still here. She held onto his 2 fingers a little tighter after that. Behind them, he heard the coffee stand chairs scrape against tile. Unhurried, deliberate. The sound of men who had found what they were looking for, and were in no rush because they already knew how the night ended. Woo-sok knew that sound. He had been the one making it for 15 years. He steered Dessa through the connecting passage, past the yellow-vested school group, past a row of darkened shops, toward the warm glow of a small bakery tucked into the far corner of the terminal, the one place in this station loud enough to disappear inside and quiet enough to think. Are we getting bread? Dessa asked, perking up slightly. We're getting safe, he said. She considered this. Can we get bread too? Despite everything, the men behind them, the phone in his pocket, the name on a list that was going to outlast this night one way or another, something shifted in Woo-sok's jaw. Not quite a smile, close enough to matter. Yes, he said. We can get bread. The bakery smelled like warm bread and burnt sugar and the kind of ordinary life Woo-sok had stopped believing existed for men like him. He chose the corner table without thinking back to the wall, full view of the entrance, one step from the emergency exit. 15 years of survival compressed into a seating choice. Dessa climbed onto the chair across from him, dropped her turtle backpack onto the table, and immediately pressed her nose against the glass display case beside them. They have the round ones, she announced. My mama lets me have the round ones. Then you'll have the round ones, he said, eyes on the entrance. A young server appeared. Woo-sok ordered without looking at the menu 2 of whatever she was pointing at. Black coffee, warm milk. The server glanced between them once, smiled the way people smile at fathers and daughters, and disappeared. Woo-sok let the assumption sit without correcting it. Outside the bakery window, the east corridor moved at its own rhythm. Travelers, families, the yellow-vested school group filing past in a crooked line. No gray suits yet, but they were coming. Men like that didn't lose a target, they simply took their time, because time was the one thing they always had more of. You're doing it again, Dessa said. He looked at her. Doing what? Watching the door like something bad is coming. She said it matter-of-factly, pulling her backpack onto her lap and unzipping the front pocket. My mama does that sometimes too, when we're in a new place. It's a habit, he said. My mama says habits are just scared feelings wearing a costume. Woo-sok looked at her for a long moment, How old did you say you were? 5, Dessa said, producing a small notebook from her backpack worn at the corners, covered in sticker stars. But I listen a lot. She opened the notebook and uncapped a stubby crayon with the focus of someone beginning important work. What are you doing? He asked. Writing down clues, she said. That's what detectives do. My mama reads me detective stories before bed. She smoothed the page with her small palm. Clue number 1. She was at the east corridor by the pigeons. Clue number 2, she had a writing notebook, so she probably sat down somewhere. My mama always sits down when she writes. She can't write standing up. Woo-suk watched her draw a careful, crooked bird in the margin of the page. Clue number 3. Dessa continued, tongue pressing slightly to her lip in concentration. There was a bench near the pigeons, by the flower shop. She would have sat there to wait for me once she realized I was gone. She looked up, crayon suspended. We should go back to the bench, she said. Woo-suk had already thought of this. He had also thought of the 2 men in gray suits, who were currently somewhere between the coffee stand and this bakery. Going back to the east corridor meant walking toward them. Staying here meant letting them narrow the distance at their own pace. Neither option was clean. The server returned with 2 round pastries, a black coffee, and a small cup of warm milk. Dessa looked at the pastries with the reverence of someone receiving something sacred, then looked up at Woo-suk. You have to eat one too, she said. My mama says food tastes better when you eat with someone. He wrapped both hands around the coffee cup and said nothing. She pushed the second pastry an inch closer to him. He picked it up. She smiled quick and bright, like a light someone flicked on, then returned immediately to her notebook with the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. Woo-suk took a slow sip of coffee and let his eyes move back to the corridor window. There, gray suit, east entrance, moving without urgency, the way a man moves when he already knows where he's going. The second one would be at the south exit, standard pinch formation. Close the escape routes first, then tighten the circle. Woo-suk had designed this exact approach for other people, in other stations, in other countries. He knew how long he had. Not long enough to wait them out. Dessa, he said, keeping his voice even. She said, still writing. When we leave here, I need you to stay close. Don't stop walking. Don't let go. Don't talk to anyone except me. Can you do that? She looked up slowly. Those eyes steady, searching. Far older than 5 years had any right to produce moved across his face. Is something bad coming? She asked. He held her gaze. Nothing is going to touch you. She studied him for another second. Then she capped her crayon, closed her notebook, and slid it carefully back into her backpack. She zipped it, adjusted the straps, took one final committed bite of her pastry. Okay, she said, chewing. I'm ready. You're not scared? She swallowed. Thought about it honestly, the way children think about things without performance, without pretense. My mama says being scared just means something matters, she said. Finding her matters. So I'm a little scared. But that's okay. Woo-suk set down his coffee. In 30 years of living, 15 of them spent in rooms where fear was currency and weakness was a death sentence. No one had ever made courage sound that simple. He stood. She slid off the chair, backpack on, and reached for his 2 fingers without being asked. They walked out of the bakery and straight toward the gray suit in the east corridor. Not running, not hiding, walking like a father and daughter with somewhere to be and nothing to prove. The gray suit saw them the moment they stepped out of the bakery. Woo-suk felt it before he saw it, that particular compression in the air when someone hunting you locks on. Like a door closing in a room you're still standing in. He didn't slow down, didn't look away. He kept his stride even. Dessa's 2 fingers wrapped around his, her backpack bouncing with each step, her eyes still scanning faces for cloud hair and round glasses. The gray suit was young, late 20s, sharp jaw, sharper eyes, the particular stillness of a man who had spent years learning to look like he wasn't watching. He stood at the mouth of the east corridor, with the unhurried certainty of someone who had already decided how the next 5 minutes would end. Then his eyes dropped to Dessa, and for one unguarded fraction of a second, barely a breath, barely anything, something crossed his face that wasn't calculation. Something that looked almost like hesitation, like a man catching a glimpse of something he hadn't budgeted for and needing a moment to put it away. Woo-suk saw it. He filed it. He steered Dessa toward the flower kiosk, the same one where the pigeons had been, where her mother had last been standing. He crouched beside a display of white carnations and spoke to Dessa in a voice just loud enough to carry. Do you think she likes these ones or the yellow ones? Dessa looked at the flowers with genuine consideration. The yellow ones. She says white ones make her sad. Then we'll remember that. He straightened. The gray suit had moved closer 12 feet now, closing slowly. Behind them, from the direction of the south exit, Woo-suk registered the second man entering the corridor, right on schedule. A station official appeared from the side passage, middle-aged, tired eyes, the particular expression of someone who had worked too many midnight shifts to be surprised by anything. He slowed when he saw them, gaze moving between Woo-suk's face, his tattooed collar, and the small girl at his side. "Sir," the official said carefully, "is everything all right here?" The gray suit stopped moving. This was the moment. Whatever their orders were, they hadn't accounted for a station official, a child, and a public corridor all at once. Men like that preferred shadows. Paperwork and witnesses were the enemy of clean work. The official was still waiting. Woo-suk looked down at Dessa. She was looking up at him, not afraid, not confused, just present, trusting him with the same unreasonable completeness she had trusted him with from the very first second. He looked back at the official. "We're fine," he said. She wandered off near the east platform. "I've been trying to find her mother." The official's eyes moved to Dessa. "Is this your father, sweetheart?" Dessa opened her mouth. Woo-suk felt the entire corridor hold its breath. She looked at the official, then up at Woo-suk, then back at the official, with the patient expression of someone about to explain something obvious. "He's helping me find my mama," she said. "He's very good at watching doors." The official blinked. Woo-suk kept his face completely still. "She gets nervous in crowds," he said, his voice carrying exactly the right weight of mild parental exhaustion. "We got separated near the platform. Her mother is somewhere in the terminal, cloud hair, round glasses, carrying a notebook. Has anyone reported a missing child at the information desk?" The shift was subtle but complete. The official was no longer assessing Woo-suk. He was now solving a problem. "Not in the last hour," the official said, already reaching for his radio. "But I can check with the north desk. What's the child's name?" "Dessa," Woo-suk said. "And the mother's name?" A half-second of silence. "Vera," Dessa said helpfully. "Vera Isaac. She spells it Vera. I know because she taught me." The official nodded, radio already at his mouth, moving away with the focused energy of a man who now had a task. Woo-suk straightened slowly. The gray suit was still there, closer now, 8 feet. His hand rested at his jacket pocket with the patience of something waiting to be used. But his eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, had moved to Dessa once, then away, the way a man's eyes move from something he has decided not to look at directly. That hesitation again. Woo-suk looked at him directly for the first time. Not a challenge, not a warning, just a look that said everything that needed to be said between two men who understood the same language. Not here. Not tonight. Not in front of her. 3 seconds passed. The gray suit's jaw tightened. His hand moved away from his pocket. He took 1 step back, the retreat of a man filing something away for later rather than letting it go. Then he turned and walked toward the south exit. Dessa tugged Woo-suk's fingers. "The official is going to find my mama?" "He's going to try," Woo-suk said. "What do we do now?" He looked down at her. Her sticker-covered notebook was already back in her hand, crayon uncapped, ready for the next clue. 5 years old, alone in a midnight station, with a man whose name made governments uncomfortable, and she was taking notes. "Now," he said, "we go to the bench by the pigeons, and we wait." Dessa nodded, satisfied. She wrote something carefully in her notebook, then held it up for him to see, in large, uneven letters, surrounded by crayon stars. Clue 4. He is not lost. He is just waiting to be found. Woo-suk looked at those words for a long moment. Then he looked away before she could see what they did to his face. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's go find your mother." The bench by the pigeon kiosk was empty. Dessa sat down on it with the careful precision of someone marking a spot on a map. She placed her notebook on her knee, smoothed the page, and looked out at the corridor with the patient, unhurried expression of someone who had decided that waiting was simply another form of looking. Woo-suk remained standing. He had not sat down in a public space with his back unprotected since he was 19 years old. He positioned himself at the edge of the kiosk, half in the light, half out of it, and watched the corridor the way he always watched everything, quietly, completely. Like a man reading a language most people didn't know existed. The gray suit had not reappeared. That meant nothing. Absence was not safety. Absence was just the part of the story you couldn't see yet. "She always comes back," Dessa said suddenly. He glanced down at her. "My mama," she clarified, without looking up from her notebook. "Sometimes she gets lost in her head when she's writing. She forgets where she put things. Her keys. Her glasses." A small pause. "Me. Once. But only for 4 minutes. She cried more than I did." Woo-suk said nothing. He kept his eyes on the corridor. "Do you have a mama?" Dessa asked. The question arrived, the way all her questions arrived, without warning, without armor, landing exactly where it was least expected. "I did," he said. Dessa absorbed this with the quiet seriousness she gave everything. What was she like? He thought about it longer than he intended to. "Stubborn," he said finally. "She never let anything go. Once she decided something mattered, nothing in the world could move her off it." Dessa nodded slowly, like this made complete sense. That's what mamas are for. The flower kiosk vendor, an older woman with tired hands and a red apron, had been watching them for several minutes, not with suspicion, with the particular softness of someone watching something that reminded them of something else. She caught Woo-suk's eye and offered a small nod. He nodded back. Then he saw her. She came from the direction of the North Passage, moving fast, notebook pressed to her chest. Cloud hair pulled loose from whatever it had been tied in, round glasses, slightly crooked on her face. Her eyes were scanning the corridor with the focused desperation of a woman trying to stay composed and failing at the edges. She was younger than he expected, mid-30s. A green coat that matched Dessa's backpack, clearly deliberate, clearly the kind of detail a mother and daughter planned together. She was beautiful in the way that people are beautiful, when they are completely unaware of themselves, all attention outward, nothing held back. Woo-suk looked at her face and felt the ground shift beneath 15 years of certainty. He knew that face, not from a photograph, not from a file, from a night 4 years ago in a hotel corridor in Amsterdam, when he had stood outside a door with a key card in his hand and a name on a list and had made a choice that had no place in the life he was living. Vera Isaac. The witness. The one who had seen things she was never supposed to see, who had been in a room she was never supposed to be in, who had known enough to dismantle an entire operation with a single conversation. He had been sent to make sure that conversation never happened. He had stood outside that door for 6 minutes. He had thought about the life behind it, not the file, not the threat assessment, not the numbers and contingencies. The life, the actual breathing human life on the other side of that door. Then he had walked away. He had called in a confirmed elimination. He had falsified the report. He had buried the record so deeply that no one had ever questioned it. In 4 years, he had never once allowed himself to wonder what had happened to her after that night. Now she was 30 feet away, moving toward him with her glasses crooked and her heart in her throat, and she had a 5-year-old daughter who kept a detective notebook and believed that turtles could fly. The breath that moved through him was slow and quiet and completely invisible. He looked down at Dessa. "Your mother," he said. "Green coat. North Passage." Dessa's head snapped up. For 1 full second she was completely still, and then she was off the bench like a small red comet, backpack flying, notebook clutched to her chest, cutting through the corridor with a speed that made the pigeons scatter. "Mama," the word hit the station like something breaking open. Vera dropped to her knees on the cold tile before Dessa reached her, arms already open, glasses knocked fully sideways by the impact of 30 pounds of 5-year-old moving at full velocity. She held on with both arms, face buried in Dessa's hair, shoulders shaking with the particular relief of a woman who had been holding herself together by a thread and had just been handed permission to let go. Woo-suk watched from beside the kiosk. He did not move closer. He stood in the half-light where he had always stood at the edge of things, outside the warmth, watching a world he had spent 15 years making sure he had no place in. Vera looked up over Dessa's shoulder. Her eyes found him across the corridor. And in the fraction of a second before recognition arrived, before memory and fear, and 4 years of a secret she had carried alone could rearrange her face, there was just gratitude, pure and clean and completely unguarded. Then she knew. The moment lasted exactly 3 seconds. Vera's eyes on his face. Recognition moving through her like a current, slow at first, then all at once. The gratitude draining, replaced by something older and colder and far more complicated. Her arms tightened around Dessa without her seeming to notice she was doing it. Woo-suk didn't move, didn't speak. He simply held her gaze from across the corridor with the stillness of a man who understood exactly what she was feeling and had no argument against any of it. He had stood outside her door 4 years ago. He had walked away, but he had also been sent there, and she knew what that meant. Dessa pulled back from her mother's arms just enough to turn and point at him with the full-armed enthusiasm of someone introducing the most important person in the room. "Mama, that's the man. He watched the doors and got me bread, and he knew your name was Vera before I told him." The last part landed in the silence between them like a stone into still water. Vera straightened slowly, one hand keeping Dessa close. Her eyes hadn't left his face. The gratitude was gone now, replaced by the careful, measuring expression of a woman who had survived something most people didn't survive and had spent every day since calculating exactly how much trust anything deserved. Woo-suk crossed the corridor. He stopped 6 feet from her, close enough to speak quietly, far enough to give her room to run if that's what she decided. "You're not safe here," he said. "There are 2 men in this station. They are not here for the same reason I am, but they are here for a related one. I need you to trust me for the next 20 minutes, and ask every question you have after." Vera's jaw tightened. "You were sent to kill me." "Yes, and yet." "And yet?" he said. The word sat between them, small and enormous at the same time. Dessa looked between the 2 adults with the focused attention of someone following a conversation in a language she almost understood. Then she reached out and took 2 of her mother's fingers and 2 of Woo-suk's fingers and held both simultaneously. "He's safe, Mama," she said with complete authority. "I checked." Something moved through Vera's face that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite tears and was somehow both at once. She looked down at her daughter, then back up at him. 20 minutes, she said quietly. He nodded once and turned. He led them away from the east corridor, away from the south exit, away from every route that was now compromised, through the connecting passage, past the darkened shops, deeper into the terminal where the crowd thinned and the architecture changed older, quieter, the stone arches of the original station swallowing the noise of the newer wings. There was a place he had noted when he first arrived, not because he had planned any of this, simply because noting places was something his mind did automatically, without effort, without rest. A small alcove off the West Passage, a tucked-away cafe that closed at 10 but left its heating on, a door that was never fully locked because the vendor used it for early morning deliveries. He pressed it open. The warmth hit them first, then the smell, old wood, ground coffee, the ghost of warm bread from the morning shift. 6 small tables, amber light from a single lamp left burning above the counter. Outside the narrow window, the platform was a slow river of steam and shadows. Dessa walked in like she had been here before, chose the table nearest the window without hesitation, and climbed onto the chair. "It smells like Grandma's house," she said, satisfied. Vera stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the space with the eyes of a woman who had learned the hard way to understand rooms before she entered them. Then she stepped inside. Woo-suk pulled the door closed behind them. He checked the window, checked the rear passage, chose a position at the end table where he could see both the door and the street-facing glass, and sat down for the first time since the bench. The silence between the 3 of them settled like something that had been waiting to happen. Dessa produced her notebook, uncapped her crayon, and began drawing with the focused calm of someone for whom the world had been set right again. Her mother was beside her. Her backpack was on. The round pastry from earlier had left a small powdered sugar ghost on her sleeve that she hadn't noticed. Vera watched her daughter draw for a long moment. Then she looked across the table at Woo-suk. "She trusts you," she said quietly. Not an accusation, not quite an absolution. Simply an observation she was trying to understand. "I know," he said. "It takes her a long time to trust people." He said nothing. Outside, a train exhaled slowly along the platform, steam rising and dissolving against the dark glass. "Amsterdam," Vera said finally. "You were outside my door for 6 minutes. I heard your footsteps stop. I heard them leave." The amber light held steady. "I counted," she said. "Every second of those 6 minutes." He looked at her directly. She looked back not with anger, not with fear, but with the quiet, unflinching honesty of a woman who had carried something heavy for 4 years and had decided tonight she was setting it down. "Why did you walk away?" she asked. He looked at Dessa, small head bent over her notebook, crayon moving in slow, careful circles, completely at peace in a cafe that wasn't open in a station full of men who wanted her mother gone. Then he looked back at Vera. Between them, the silence held everything. Neither of them had words for 6 minutes outside a door. 4 years of living carefully, one night in a station where everything had bent in a direction no one had planned. "I just did," he said. And in the amber light of that closed cafe, with steam moving slow against the dark window, that was enough. Dessa found the checkers set on the shelf behind the counter. It was old, the kind of set that lives in cafes for years without anyone claiming it. The red pieces faded to pink, the black ones worn smooth at the edges. She carried it to the table with both hands, the focused solemnity of someone transporting something important. "We play while we wait," she announced, setting it down between herself and Woo-suk with the certainty of someone who had already decided this was happening. Vera looked up from the window. Woo-suk looked at the board. "I don't play checkers," he said. "I'll teach you," Dessa said, already arranging the pieces with practiced hands. "It's easy. You just have to think before you move. My mama says that's good advice for everything," Vera said nothing, but the corner of her mouth moved. Woo-suk pulled his chair closer to the board. Dessa walked him through the rules with the patient authority of a 5-year-old who had strong opinions about people who skipped steps. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, she looked at him with an expression that said she expected questions. He had none. "You were paying attention," she said, slightly surprised. "I pay attention to everything," he said. "I know," she said. "That's why I picked you." The game began. Dessa played the way she did everything with complete focus and no self-consciousness, chin resting in her palm between moves, eyes tracking the board with a seriousness that belonged on someone 4 times her age. She took his piece on the 3rd move without hesitation. "You move too fast," she said. "You have to think about what you're protecting, not just where you want to go." Woo-suk looked at the board. Then he looked at her. "Where did you learn that?" "My mama's stories," she said. The turtle moved too fast at first, too. He kept falling. Then he learned to look down before he looked up. Vera had stopped watching the window. She was watching her daughter now, the way mothers watch their children when they say something that lands somewhere unexpected. A mixture of recognition and quiet wonder at the person growing in front of them. The game continued. Woo-suk lost the first round without trying to. Not deliberately, he simply found that watching Dessa think was more interesting than winning. The way her brow pulled together before a move, the way she whispered the options to herself under her breath, too quiet to hear but visible in the movement of her lips. "Again," she said, already resetting the board. "You haven't won yet," she told him. "You're letting me." "How do you know?" She gave him a long, steady look. "Because you watch everything. You wouldn't miss that move unless you chose to." The cafe held its warmth around them. Outside, the platform moved in its slow nocturnal rhythm, a train arriving, sighing, departing. Steam against dark glass. Vera spoke quietly from across the table. "Tell me something true," she said. "Something that has nothing to do with Amsterdam, or who sent you, or what happens after tonight." Woo-suk was quiet for a moment. Dessa was already studying the reset board, giving him the particular privacy that children give adults when they are pretending not to listen while listening to everything. "I used to steal cookies," he said. Dessa's eyes lifted from the board. Vera blinked. "When I was 7, he said. "My mother baked on Sundays. Red bean cookies. She counted them always. She knew exactly how many she made and exactly how many should be left." He looked at the board without seeing it. "I hid them inside an old shoebox under my bed. Not to eat them. Just to have something that was mine. Something I chose." The cafe was very quiet. "Did she find them?" Dessa asked. "Every time," he said. "She always found them. She never said anything. She just baked more the following Sunday." A pause. "I think she was counting the ones I took as ones she made for me." Dessa set her crayon down. "She sounds like my mama," she said. Vera looked at her daughter. Something passed through her face, grief and tenderness, and the complicated love of a woman who understood exactly what it meant to keep making more when someone kept taking. "Your turn," she said to Woo-suk, nodding at the board. "Something true for something true." He considered her for a moment. "You finished the book," he said. "The turtle. You finished it." It wasn't a question. Vera's hand stilled on the table. "How?" "Because you're here," he said. "People who haven't finished what they started don't travel with their notebooks. They travel with their drafts. You had the notebook. The draft is already done." The silence that followed was different from the ones before it. Fuller somehow. Like a room after someone opens a window. Vera reached into her coat and placed the notebook on the table between them. On the cover, in her handwriting, surrounded by Dessa's sticker stars. "The Turtle Who Learned to Fly." Woo-suk looked at it for a long time. Then Dessa jumped his last piece, both hands raised, entirely delighted. "I win," she announced. "For real this time." He looked at her bright, triumphant face. "Yes," he said quietly. "You do." He wasn't talking about checkers. Vera had known for 4 years. Not everything. Not the name of the organization. Not the full depth of what she had witnessed in that hotel room in Amsterdam. Not the names of the men still moving through the world, because she had stayed quiet and stayed small and stayed alive. But she had known about him. She had known the footsteps that stopped outside her door belonged to someone sent to end her. She had known the 6 minutes of silence meant a decision was being made on the other side of that door that she had no power over. She had known, when the footsteps finally left and the corridor went quiet and the morning came, that someone had chosen to let her live. She had spent 4 years not knowing why. She had spent 4 years not knowing who, until now. She looked at him across the amber light of the closed cafe. This man with the scarred hands and the tattooed collar, and the face that gave nothing away, except in the moments when it gave everything. and said the thing she had, carried alone for 4 years. "I knew you didn't do it," she said. "I knew because if you had, it would have been silent. Whatever I witnessed in that room, whoever sent you, they don't leave witnesses. They don't leave noise. They leave nothing." She paused. "I left Amsterdam the next morning. I changed everything. My name on the lease, my phone, my route, everything except Dessa." Woo-sok was very still. "She wasn't born yet," Vera said quietly. "When you were outside that door, she wasn't born yet." The weight of that settled over the table like weather. Dessa was asleep. She had fallen asleep between one move and the next checkers piece still in her hand, head tilting sideways until it found Vera's shoulder, small face completely slack with the absolute trust of a child who had decided the world was safe enough to leave for a while. Vera had eased her down gently, turtle backpack tucked under her head as a pillow, red coat spread over her like a blanket. She slept like someone had switched off every care she'd ever had. Woo-sok watched her sleep for a moment. "After Amsterdam, I had nothing," Vera continued, her voice lower now, careful not to disturb the quiet. "No home, no name that felt like mine, no certainty that any morning was guaranteed." She touched the edge of Dessa's coat. "And then she arrived, and I understood for the first time what those 6 minutes outside my door actually cost you." He said nothing. "You falsified the report," she said. "It was not a question." "Yes, they believed it. For 4 years," he said, "until 3 weeks ago. The cafe held its breath." Vera looked at him steadily. "That's why you're here. At this station. Tonight." "I had a name on a list," he said. "It wasn't yours. But the man whose name it was, he found the discrepancy in the report. He started asking questions I couldn't answer without answering everything." A pause. "I came here to finish what I started 4 years ago. Not you. Him. And now he knows I'm here. His men know I'm here. The two in the gray suits, they aren't his. They're the organization's, which means the report has been fully reopened." He looked at her. "Which means you are no longer a closed file." Vera absorbed this without flinching. 4 years of living carefully had produced in her a particular kind of stillness. Not the stillness of someone who had stopped feeling, but of someone who had learned to feel without being moved off their feet by it. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Your train leaves at 2:40, he said. "You have a connection at Frankfurt. You and Dessa board at platform 7 in 40 minutes. She stared at him. "How do you know my itinerary?" "I know everything about this station tonight," he said. "It's what I do." A long silence. "Where does the Frankfurt connection go?" he asked. "Home," she said. "We were visiting my sister." Dessa had never met her. She looked down at her sleeping daughter. "I wanted her to know where she comes from." Woo-sok nodded slowly. "The men in gray suits," Vera said. "They'll be at platform 7. "Yes." "And the man whose name was on your list. He'll send more when these two don't report back." Vera was quiet for a moment. Then she reached across the table and opened her notebook to the last page. She wrote something quickly, without hesitation, the pen moving with the certainty of someone who had made a decision before they realized they were making it. She tore the page out and placed it in front of him. It was an address, a city in another country, a phone number beneath it. "My sister's," she said. "In case you need somewhere that isn't on any list." He looked at the paper. He thought about 6 minutes outside a door and a turtle who was afraid of the sky, until he understood it had always been his. He folded the paper carefully and placed it inside his jacket. "Get Dessa's things together," he said, standing. "I'll take care of platform 7. Vera stood. She looked at him with the full, unguarded honesty she had been holding at the edges all evening. "You already saved us once," she said. "That time I was alone," he said. This time she helped. He nodded toward Dessa. Then he walked out into the station to finish what 4 years ago he had quietly, irrevocably, already begun. Platform 7 was at the far end of the terminal. Woo-sok walked toward it alone, hands loose at his sides, pace unhurried. The station had thinned at this hour, the midnight crowd replaced by a quieter, more exhausted kind of traveler. People moving through rather than waiting. People who wanted to be somewhere else and were almost there. He passed the coffee stand. Empty now. The chairs stacked. The gray suits were no longer where they had been, which meant they had repositioned, closer to the platform, tightening the circle the way they had been trained to patient, methodical, certain. He understood the certainty. He had built it in men like them. The west corridor opened into the main platform hall, high ceilings, stone arches, the kind of architecture that made sound travel strangely, footsteps arriving before the person did. 4 trains on 4 platforms. Platform 7 was the furthest. separated from the others by a narrow service passage that ran alongside the tracks. He stopped at the entrance to the passage and looked. Gray Suit 1 was at the base of the platform stairs, positioned casually shoulder against the wall, phone in hand, the performance of someone waiting for a train. His eyes moved across every face that passed without appearing to move at all. Gray Suit 2 would be on the platform itself, high ground, watching the stairs from above. Standard formation, clean and efficient, and entirely predictable to someone who had written the manual. Woo-suk moved through the service passage without a light, one hand trailing the wall, footsteps silent on the concrete floor. He came up through the maintenance access point onto the platform level behind Gray Suit 2, who was exactly where he expected him to be. He was young, younger than the distance had suggested. Standing at the platform edge with his back to the maintenance door, he had the posture of someone trying very hard to look like he belonged somewhere he didn't quite belong. His jacket was slightly too large. His shoes were slightly too new. A photograph, small, creased at the corner, was just visible in his breast pocket, the edge of it catching the platform light. A photograph he had looked at enough times to crease the corner. Woo-suk filed this without sentiment. He stepped beside him. "Your man downstairs," he said quietly. "Tell him to stand down. Both of you walk to the north exit and keep walking. Whatever you were paid tonight is not enough for what happens if you don't." Gray Suit 2 turned his head slowly. There was a moment, brief, honest, quickly suppressed, where his eyes registered exactly who was standing beside him and what that meant. Then his jaw set. "We have our orders," he said. "I know," Woo-suk said. "I'm giving you new ones." A long silence stretched between them. On the tracks below, the Frankfurt train sat breathing, doors not yet open, departure still 20 minutes away. The platform was quiet, 3 other travelers at the far end. A porter moving luggage. Gray Suit 2 reached slowly for his jacket. Woo-suk's hand covered his before it arrived. "That would be the last thing you did tonight," he said, very quietly. "I am giving you a choice, because there is a child coming to this platform in 15 minutes who has already had enough of other people's bad decisions in her life." A pause. "Make a good one." The young man was very still. Something shifted in his face, not fear exactly, not reason exactly, but the particular expression of a man who had looked at a creased photograph enough times to know what he was actually being asked to protect and what he was actually being asked to destroy, and had found in this one quiet moment that he could not make those two things sit beside each other comfortably anymore. He reached into his pocket carefully, deliberately, and typed 4 words and sent them. Below, Gray Suit 1 pushed off the wall, looked at his phone, looked up at nothing in particular, and walked toward the north exit. Gray Suit 2 looked back at Woo-suk. "The organization won't stop," he said. It wasn't a threat. It was almost a warning, man to man, across everything that stood between them. "Whatever you're doing tonight doesn't end tonight." "I know," Woo-suk said. "Go." He went. Woo-suk stood on the empty platform and listened to the train breathe. He heard them before he saw them. Dessa's backpack zipper hitting her hip in its small, rhythmic way. The particular tempo of short legs keeping up with longer ones. He turned. Vera came through the platform entrance with Dessa's hand in hers, notebook tucked under her arm, their 2 small bags rolling behind them. Dessa was sleep-rumpled and warm-eyed, her red coat slightly crooked, one of her hair clips hanging loose. She saw him and her whole face opened like a window. She crossed the platform in 6 running steps and wrapped 2 fingers around his without slowing down, falling into step beside him as if this was simply where she belonged. "You waited," she said. "I said I would," he said. Dessa considered this with the gravity it deserved. Then she looked up at the train and back at him. "Are you coming with us?" He crouched down to her level. Her face in the platform light was the most uncomplicated thing he had seen in 15 years. Round cheeks, loose hair clip, eyes that had never once decided he was something to be afraid of. "Not this time," he said, her brow pulled together. "But you're lost." "I know where I am," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her coat pocket and produced the folded crayon, drawing the one she had shown him hours ago, the cloud-haired woman and the small girl in red. She pressed it into his hand. "So you don't forget what found looks like," she said. The train doors opened. Woo-suk stood. Vera was watching him from 3 feet away, with everything she couldn't say arranged quietly in her face. He handed her the folded address paper back. "You'll need this more than I will," he said. "Take a different route to Frankfurt, not the direct one." She took it. Her hand closed around it and stayed closed. "Will you be all right?" she asked. He said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. Dessa tugged her mother's hand toward the open doors. Vera followed, pausing once at the threshold, one hand on the doorframe, looking back at him with the full weight of 4 years and 6 minutes and one impossible night. Then she stepped onto the train. The doors closed. Woo-sok stood on the empty platform with a folded crayon drawing in his hand and watched the Frankfurt train pull slowly out of Incheon station. He stood there until the last light of it disappeared into the dark. Then he turned and walked back into the station alone. Behind him, the platform was empty. Ahead of him, the rest of it waited. 3 years later, the apartment in Seoul was small by choice. Woo-sok had lived in large spaces for most of his adult life, rooms chosen for exits rather than comfort, buildings chosen for anonymity rather than home. He had slept in suites and safe houses and places with no names, surrounded by men whose loyalty was rented and furniture that belonged to someone else. The apartment on Mapo-gu had 2 windows, a narrow kitchen, and a view of a street where children walked to school in the morning. He had chosen it in 20 minutes and had not once questioned the choice. He was making coffee when the package arrived. No return address. Postmarked from a city in another country, the same city whose address he had memorized from a torn notebook page and never written down anywhere. The handwriting on the outer wrapping was careful and deliberate, each letter formed with the kind of attention that suggested the person writing had thought about every stroke. He recognized it immediately. He set down his coffee and opened it at the kitchen table. Inside the outer wrapping was a second layer brown paper tied with a length of red ribbon, the kind of red that had no business existing anywhere gray. Tied to the ribbon was a small folded note. He opened the note first. It said, in a child's large, uneven handwriting surrounded by crayon stars, "We finished it. Chapter 1 is yours." He set the note down carefully. He untied the red ribbon. Inside the brown paper was a book. A real book printed, bound, covered in the deep blue of a night sky with a single small figure on the front. A turtle, mid-air. Wings that didn't belong to him, and that he was using anyway, rising above a city of lights with an expression of pure, uncomplicated determination on his small green face. The title, in gold letters across the top, "The Turtle Who Learned to Fly." Below it, the author's name. Below that, in smaller text, a dedication. He turned to it, for Dessa, who already knew the sky was hers, and for the man on the bench, who forgot that it was his too. "You know who you are." Woo-sok sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Outside, the street was beginning to fill with its morning rhythm. A woman with a cart of vegetables, 2 boys racing each other to the corner, a dog investigating something important near the base of a lamppost. The ordinary, unhurried movement of a world that did not know his name and had no reason to. He opened the book to chapter 1. The first line read, "There was once a turtle who sat very still at the bottom of a very tall cliff and watched everything else move without him." He read slowly, not the way he read files fast, extracting, discarding, slowly. The coffee going cold beside him, the street noise rising and falling outside his window. The turtle in the story was stubborn and tired and had forgotten, somewhere along the way, that the sky was something other creatures moved through rather than something to be observed from a safe distance below. The turtle met a small red bird. The small red bird had no patience for excuses. She did not teach the turtle to fly. She simply refused to believe he couldn't, and kept showing up on the cliff until he ran out of reasons not to try. The first time he tried, he fell. The second time, he fell again. The third time, he fell, and the small red bird fell with him, not because she had to, but because she had decided that was the kind of bird she was. The fourth time, he flew. Not gracefully, not perfectly, not in the way that other things flew with ease and certainty and the complete comfort of creatures born to it. He flew the way someone flies who had no business flying and did it anyway. Awkward and determined and completely, irreversibly airborne. Woo-sok closed the book on the last page. He sat with it closed in his hands for a moment, the blue cover facing up, the small turtle mid-flight against the night sky. Then he turned to chapter 1 again, the chapter that was his. It was short, only a paragraph, set apart from the main story in its own quiet space before the turtle's journey began. It read, "Before the turtle learned to fly, he sat on a cold bench in a busy place and waited for something he didn't have a name for yet. He had been waiting for a long time. He was very good at waiting. He was not very good at knowing what he was waiting for. Then something small found him, something that was not afraid of him, something that took 2 of his fingers and pulled, and the waiting ended." Woo-sok set the book down on the table. He reached into the kitchen drawer, where he kept the things that had no category, a watch with a stopped hand, a key to a door that no longer existed, a folded piece of brown paper that had once been wrapped around a red ribbon. He placed the book beside the folded crayon drawing he had kept for 3 years, the one that showed a cloud-haired woman and a small girl in red. the one that showed what found looked like. He picked up his coffee. Cold now. He drank it anyway. Outside, the two boys who had been racing each other to the corner came racing back the other way, laughing at something only they understood, their voices carrying through the window and filling the small apartment on Mapogu with the particular noise of a life that had no idea how lucky it was just to be itself. Woo Sok sat at his kitchen table, and for the first time in as long as he could remember, he was not waiting for anything. He was already there,